you're suggesting that President Obama being reelected is going to be bad for small businesses. I'm looking at these stats that show that average small business growth during the Clinton years, August 1993 to March 2001, 2.3% growth. And these are actual real small businesses, 20 to 500 employees, as opposed to, people like the Koch brothers having a pass through and calling it a small business, or Paul Singer having a pass through and just running billions of dollars through it and calling it a small business. During the Bush administration, the last Republican administration, it wasn't 2.3% like it was during Clinton. It was only 1%, and that only goes through December 2007, so that those numbers are not contaminated by the Great Crash.
Okay. So
what makes you think? What makes you think that? I mean, historically, if you look at the last 100 years in the United States, stock markets go up more under Democrats than they do under Republicans. Wages for working people go up more under Democrats than they do under Republican administrations. The only thing that goes up more under Republican administrations than Democratic administrations over the last 100 years is the wealth of the super rich and the poverty of the poor.
And what about the last 4 years, Tom?
Well, the wealth of the super rich has been increasing, but not anywhere near as rapidly as it was during the George W. Bush administration. And the poverty of the poor, we've been catching them with food stamps and unemployment benefits. Now, I know Republicans want to do away with those things, but
I guess the reason I'm having trouble, I know your listeners are like, oh my gosh, Thom Hartmann's destroying them. The reason I'm having trouble even having a conversation with you as usual is it always has to be Democrat, Republican. It always has to be rich, poor. Let's have a conversation about principles, about real issues here. Not just, the Democrats.
That's fine. You lead it.
Republicans. This is ridiculous.
Okay. Give me a frame that you want to debate in, and I'll debate you in it.
Because Republicans under George Bush spent tons of money, spent so much money, it's ridiculous. So I'm not going to sit here and defend Republicans like you defend the left just for the sake of party labels. So I'm not going to have that conversation, Tom. I can't even relate on your level.
Okay, that's fine. Similarly, I won't. I would not defend Democrats for things like the NDAA. But setting that aside, let's talk. You want to talk principles? Let's talk principles. What makes you think? If you look at the history of the United States, or you look at the history of any of the OECD nations, the 30, 34, 38 most developed nations in the world over the last 100 years, what makes you think that having an austerity-driven budget, basically, a conservative budget, is going to be better than having a democratic socialist, a very liberal budget, when it's the democratic socialist nations right now that are doing very well, thank you very much. Sweden, Finland, Norway, Denmark, they're all doing great. They all have low unemployment. They have, go ahead.
Okay, I believe that, in America, people can spend and invest the money that they earn more wisely than a centralized bureaucratic government out of D.C.
I don't disagree with that. I've got some money in savings. I don't want the government investing it for me. I'll invest it and lose it myself. Which I've done more often than not.
So I think moving any direction we can move closer to the Constitution, where the federal government has a limited role and states have a more sovereign and powerful role, then I think we're moving in the right direction. And right now,
well, wait a minute. Why?
The government is spending
why?
More
If first of all, the founders did not envision a limited federal government. Alexander Hamilton. This is Alexander Hamilton, December 5th, 1791. He's the Secretary of the Treasury in the George Washington administration. He was there in the room when the Constitution was written. In fact, he gave one of the more famous speeches about it. He signed it. He literally one of the founders. He said, and I quote, "The terms general welfare were doubtless intended to signify more than was expressed or imported in those which preceded. Otherwise, numerous exigencies incident to the affairs of the nation would have been left out without a provision. It is not fit that the constitutional authority of the Union to appropriate its revenues should have been restricted within narrower limits than the general welfare, because this necessarily embraces a vast variety of particulars which are subject neither of specification nor of definition. It is therefore of necessity left to the discretion of the national legislature to pronounce upon the objects which concern the general welfare, and for which, under that description, an appropriation of money is requisite and proper." End of quote. The first paragraph of Article 1, Section 8 of the Constitution, which is the enumerated powers of, the conservatives tend to refer to as the enumerated powers. The phrase does not appear in the Constitution, but the powers of Congress. the first paragraph, the first sentence talks about, Congress has the power to appropriate and spend money to promote the general welfare. The last sentence basically says the same thing all over again. How is providing people with unemployment benefits at the federal level unconstitutional?
Oh my gosh, so much going on there. First of all, that quote right there and the opinions of Hamilton were resoundingly defeated by the rest of the founding fathers.
No, they were not. They ratified the Constitution. Hamilton was one of the guys who was selling it in the Federalist Papers.
You can't just quote one founding father. What was the final result of all the founding fathers? But that's not the point I want to make right here.
Okay, well let me cite one founding father's action then. You know who was the first president to propose and then sign into law legislation providing for housing, medical care, and food for poor and indigent people?
Who?
George Washington.
Based off of the federal government?
Yes.
The federal
government. It was a poorhouse in Washington, D.C. Yes.
In D.C., D.C. would have been the nation's capital then, right? Which would have been different because that would have been the District of Columbia, which is different than all the states. So let me ask you this question. This is a very simple question. Are you out in New York, Tom?
Am I what?
Are you in New York?
No, I'm in D.C. right now.
You're in D.C. So what is the poorest neighborhood in San Diego?
I don't have a clue.
Exactly. And I don't know what the poorest neighborhood in D.C. is. So what makes anyone think that D.C. bureaucrats know what's best for the people of San Diego? I know I and my local representatives have firsthand knowledge.
Broadly, Mike, I agree with you on that. Broadly, I agree with you that whenever possible, power should be centralized locally. But there are some things that are so big, like multi-million-dollar illnesses, people getting leukemia, needing bone marrow transplants and things, that it would break a local